For decades, Janie Fricke was the sweet, soaring voice behind country music's most tender hits, Nashville's Golden Girl, twice named Female Vocalist of the Year and adored for her angelic harmonies. But behind the spotlight, the industry demanded more than just talent, it demanded silence. Silence about the heartbreak, the sacrifices, and the pressure to play by unwritten rules. Now, at 84, Janie isn't staying quiet any longer. What Nashville took from her wasn't just fame or fortune, it was something far more personal. And as she finally opens up, a different truth emerges, one that could change how we remember her legacy forever. Long before her name was etched into the annals of country music, Janie was just a girl with a voice that refused to stay quiet. Born on December 19, 1947, in South Whitley, Indiana, her earliest memories were filled with music, singing hymns in the church choir, strumming the guitar her father bought her, and harmonizing with her mother while working around the house. Her small-town upbringing was simple but rich in melody, and even then, people noticed. Teachers, neighbors, family, they all heard something in her voice that didn't just sing, it soared. After high school, she followed her passion to Indiana University, studying music education and honing her vocal control in ways that would make her one of the most precise and versatile voices in the business. But college didn't dull her ambition, it sharpened it. Janie didn't want to just teach music, she wanted to live it. So after graduation, she packed up her dreams and moved to Nashville, hoping to find her place in the crowded world of country. Nashville didn't exactly roll out the red carpet. Like so many young women before her, she found herself doing studio work to pay the bills, singing advertising jingles, demo tracks, and backup vocals. But it was in the shadows of the recording booth that her voice began to change the game. Producers called her the secret weapon. She could blend like butter, hit perfect pitch on demand, and adapt to any artist's style. Before long, she was in demand, hired to back up some of the biggest stars in the industry. She laid down harmonies for Elvis Presley, Charlie Pride, Ronnie Milsap, and Crystal Gayle. Her voice was everywhere, but no one knew her name. Janie wasn't bitter, yet. She was grateful to be working, respected by the engineers and musicians who knew the truth. Half the hits coming out of Nashville in the 1970s had her fingerprints on them. It wasn't glamorous, she wasn't on stage or winning awards, but she was there, building the soundtrack of a generation. Nashville noticed, but not in the way she hoped. They wanted her voice, not her presence, her sound, not her story. She was quietly becoming one of the most important voices in country music, yet to the outside world, she was invisible. Then came one collaboration that pulled her from the shadows into the spotlight. In 1977, Janie was asked to sing harmony for rising country star Johnny Duncan on a song called Stranger, a sultry mid-tempo number that needed just the right emotional balance. Janie didn't just deliver harmony, she delivered atmosphere. Her voice wrapped around Johnny's like a whispered secret, and when the track hit the airwaves, radio stations began asking, "Who's the female singer?" The label took notice. Audiences did, too. For the first time, Janie's name was front and center. Nashville, ever the opportunist, saw dollar signs. The same industry that had used her to prop up others suddenly offered her a solo deal with Columbia Records. Within a year, she was headlining her own singles. But the transition wasn't smooth. The label wasn't sure how to market her. Was she too polished, too soft, too safe? While her voice was radio gold, her didn't fit the new mold Nashville was embracing. Regardless, Janie dug deep, pouring her soul into tracks like Please Help Me, I'm Falling, Down to My Last Broken Heart, and the haunting ballad It Ain't Easy Being Easy, which rocketed her to the top of the charts. Her songs connected because they came from somewhere real. She wasn't flashy or loud, she was authentic, and people felt it. Her smooth, emotional delivery became her signature. She was the voice of the woman left behind, the quiet heart that still ached after the song ended. By the early 80s, Janie Fricke was no longer just a supporting act. She was winning Female Vocalist of the Year at both the CMA and ACM Awards, touring with the biggest names in the business, holding her own on country's largest stages, and becoming a staple in the genre's history. Janie Fricke's success on television and radio came with strings. The very industry that had once ignored her now tried to shape her into something else. Managers wanted a bolder image. Producers pushed for crossover hits. The woman who once sang from the heart was now being asked to fit a mold that didn't belong to her. And while Janie smiled through it, nodded politely, and did what was asked, deep down she knew something was being taken. The higher she climbed, the less control she had. The spotlight that had once seemed like salvation was starting to burn. In Nashville, the voice was only part of the package. As her star rose, so did the demands, not for better music, but for a better look. The same executives who once kept her in the shadows now wanted to transform her into a marketable icon. But their version of marketable didn't include authenticity. It meant shorter skirts, more makeup, stylized hair, and exaggerated femininity. One producer, frustrated with her resistance, reportedly snapped, "You sing like a star, Janie. But you look like you belong in a C. pew." It wasn't a compliment. It was a warning. Nashville had long demanded that women sell more than their voice. They had to sell an image, a fantasy. And Janie, soft-spoken and modest, didn't fit the mold. She tried to play along, wearing the outfits, posing for glossy promotional photos, and letting stylists reshape her appearance. But with every makeover, she felt a little less like herself. Behind the scenes, she would joke with close friends, "They want a Barbie doll, but I'm just Janie from Indiana." Still, she kept smiling. She knew what happened to women who pushed back too hard. Their records got shelved, their tours got cancelled, and their names quietly disappeared from rotation. So she complied, but never completely. Even when they wanted her to lean into the glitz, she kept her performances grounded, emotional, and real. That resistance didn't go unnoticed. Some in the industry labeled her difficult or too plain. They couldn't see that what she refused to compromise wasn't just her style, it was her identity. Janie had spent years climbing the ranks with nothing but talent and heart. Now, as the label tried to reshape her into something she wasn't, she faced a painful truth. The industry that claimed to celebrate her was trying to erase her in a different way, not by ignoring her, but by replacing her essence with a brand. The pressure took its toll. Every photo shoot became a negotiation. Every interview came with scripted talking points. Every music video was an exercise in smiling through discomfort. She wanted to talk about the craft, the lyrics, the emotion, but they wanted to talk about her hair. She began feeling trapped in a glittering cage, a star on the outside, a stranger on the inside. The very thing that had made her stand out, her sincerity, was now being squeezed out by image consultants and publicists. Nashville had finally given her a platform, only to demand that she abandon everything that had brought her there, and as the years went on, that cost became harder to bear. While the cameras showed Janie basking in the glow of awards and chart-topping singles, few knew the pain she carried just outside the spotlight. Fame has a way of masking grief, and Janie became a master at wearing that mask. In 1981, she married Randy Jackson, not the pop star, but a fellow musician and bass player who understood the long hours, the endless tours, and the pressure to perform on and off stage. At first, they were a team, but life on the road is relentless. Janie's career was on fire, and with every new hit came another obligation, another city, another show, another week apart. The strain crept in slowly, and before long, their once intimate bond became a long-distance arrangement with no end in sight, but the real heartbreak, the one she never talked about publicly, was what they lost. During those years, Janie suffered multiple miscarriages, each one a private devastation. She had always dreamed of being a mother, of balancing music and family, of someday rocking a baby instead of a stadium. But every time that hope appeared, it slipped away. And Nashville had no space for grief, no time for healing. The show had to go on. She would cry silently in dressing rooms, then dry her tears and step into the spotlight. No one ever knew, she couldn't afford for them to. Among women in the industry, there was an unspoken rule: pain had to be private or it would be used against you. Show too much emotion and you were unstable. Ask for time off and you were unreliable. So Janie buried it all, the sadness, the confusion, the rage, and poured it into her songs, singing heartbreak with a sincerity that made fans weep without realizing how real those emotions were. Nashville applauded Janie Fricke's professionalism, grace, and work ethic, but what they were really applauding was her silence, her willingness to suffer invisibly for the sake of the brand. Behind every standing ovation was a price, and for Janie, that price was love lost, dreams delayed, and a heart quietly breaking in the wings. By the time the 1990s rolled in, Janie's name, once synonymous with elegance, emotion, and vocal perfection, was fading in an industry obsessed with what was new and shiny. Country music was shifting. The new traditionalist wave was giving way to slicker sounds and younger faces. Garth Brooks had exploded, Shania Twain was on the rise, and the genre was reinventing its sound and image. Suddenly, Janie wasn't getting calls anymore. The same radio stations that had once put her into heavy rotation now passed her over without a second glance. Her latest singles barely charted, her label began pulling back on promotion, and just like that, the voice that had once soared over arenas was fading into the background again. This time, not by choice, her voice hadn't weakened, and her songs were still rich with aching honesty and graceful delivery, but in Nashville, youth had become the new currency, and Janie was no longer considered valuable. It was a cruel irony. After years of shaping the sound of the industry, she was being erased, not through scandal or controversy, but through quiet indifference. She would drive through towns where her name once lit up marquees, only to see it replaced by artists half her age with twice the marketing budget. Her legacy was shuffled into classic country slots and relegated to late-night radio. One programmer even told her team, "We love Janie, but she's not what we're playing now." It was as if her career had an expiration date, and the industry didn't even have the decency to say goodbye. The most painful part wasn't the drop in sales or the empty phone lines, it was the feeling of being disposable, of realizing that all the years she had spent pouring her soul into the music, sacrificing personal dreams, and towing every industry line meant nothing once she no longer fit the mold. Nashville, the city that had once promised her the world, now ghosted her like a one-hit wonder. And yet, through it all, Janie remained composed. She didn't lash out or beg for a second chance. She kept singing, in smaller venues, community theaters, and local festivals, because at her core, she had never been chasing fame, she had been chasing music. Still, the silence from the very machine she had once fueled began to feel deafening. Nashville hadn't just turned its back, it had rewritten the story without her in it. Janie could have walked away. She could have let the rejection sink her spirit and accepted the narrative that her time had passed. But that was never who she was. She didn't need permission to keep doing what she loved. So while the major labels moved on and radio forgot her name, she went back to the roots that had always sustained her: real music, real people, real connection. She began performing at smaller venues, county fairs, regional festivals, and intimate theaters in towns that still remembered her voice. The crowds were no longer in the tens of thousands, but they were loyal. Fans who had grown up with her music now brought their children, and sometimes even their grandchildren, to see her perform. And Janie gave them everything she had, every single time. No ego, no bitterness, just gratitude. In the early 2000s, she launched her own label, finally gaining ownership of her master recordings and creative decisions. She re-recorded her hits on her own terms, released gospel albums, Christmas collections, and acoustic versions of her most beloved tracks. Without corporate interference, she rediscovered the joy of making music for the sake of expression, not for the charts. She also began mentoring young female artists, offering the kind of guidance she had never been given when she was starting out. To them, she wasn't just a legend, she was a survivor, a teacher, and a voice of wisdom in an industry that still hadn't learned how to value its women. She spoke openly about the business side of music, the pitfalls of fame, and the importance of holding onto your identity when the world tries to strip it away. Janie wasn't staging a flashy comeback or chasing headlines, she was simply reclaiming what had always been hers, the right to be heard on her own terms. Slowly, a quiet redemption began to unfold. Legacy stations started spinning her songs again. Journalists reached out for interviews, eager to rediscover the woman whose influence had never truly disappeared, only been ignored. And when she stepped on stage, audiences stood not just for the hits, but for her resilience. Because through every industry betrayal, every heartbreak, every erased moment, Janie Fricke never gave up. She never stopped singing. And now, at long last, the world was listening again. Not because she fit their mold, but because she shattered it piece by piece, note by note. It happened quietly without flash or headlines. During a backstage interview after one of her rare solo performances in Texas, the interviewer asked Janie a question she'd been asked hundreds of times before: "What does country music mean to you?" But something was different this time. Janie paused, her eyes glistened, and for the first time in her career, she didn't filter the answer. Her voice cracked as she said, "It means everything." And it took everything. The room fell silent, and then came the unraveling, decades of carefully tucked away emotion, grief, frustration, and the ache of being forgotten spilled out in waves. She spoke of the miscarriages she was told to hide, of the marriage that quietly collapsed under the weight of touring and silence, of the first time a label told her to change her look and how it made her feel invisible. "I lost track of who I was," she said. "They told me how to walk, what to wear, even how to laugh. I did what I was told and I disappeared a little every time I agreed." She recalled nights on the road where she cried herself to sleep in hotel rooms, clutching the phone and wondering if the cost of fame was too high, and how, when her chart positions dropped, the industry ghosted her without a word. "There was no goodbye," she whispered. "No one said, 'You've done enough.' One day I was the voice of the year and the next I was just gone." The tears didn't fall dramatically, they came slowly and they didn't stop. Janie wasn't seeking sympathy or bitterness, she was simply exhausted from carrying a story no one had ever asked to hear in full. "I was told I was too quiet, too plain, too soft," she said, "but my songs were about real pain, real love, and I meant every word." She admitted there were times she wanted to walk away forever, especially in the 90s when the silence from the industry felt louder than any applause ever had, but something inside her wouldn't quit. "I couldn't give up," she said, "because the music, that was the only part of me they couldn't take." The interviewer, stunned, didn't interrupt. What they captured that day wasn't just an interview, it was an unraveling of decades, a confession. Too long withheld, a reckoning with the machine that had built her and broken her. And at 84, Janie Fricke finally allowed herself to mourn not just what she had endured, but what she had lost, the chance to live on her terms from the beginning. It wasn't a breakdown for sympathy, it was a breakthrough of truth, a final trembling statement from a woman who had given her entire life to a town that never gave her permission to be fully herself until now. In the end, Nashville didn't win. It tried to shape her, silence her, erase her, but Janie Fricke is still here. At 84, she may not be topping the charts or walking red carpets, but her voice still echoes through the halls of country music. Her influence isn't always loud, but it's lasting. Young female artists today cite her as a blueprint for vocal control, emotional delivery, and quiet strength. Listen closely to any heartbroken ballad on modern country radio and you'll hear her spirit woven into the harmonies. What Nashville tried to take, her sense of self, her creative power, her dignity, it never fully succeeded, because Janie didn't let bitterness consume her. She turned silence into sovereignty. When the industry closed its doors, she built her own. When labels lost interest, she reclaimed her catalog. When audiences forgot, she sang anyway, and in doing so, she built a legacy stronger than any trophy could hold. Her songs, "It Ain't Easy Being Easy," "Tell Me a Lie," "He's a Heartache," are not just hits, they're emotional time capsules that held up mirrors to millions of listeners who felt seen in her words. And though she was often overlooked by the powers that be, her music never stopped finding the people who needed it. That's the thing about authenticity, it outlives fashion, it outlasts gatekeepers. Janie Fricke's career wasn't defined by drama or scandal or reinvention, it was defined by truth, resilience, and a voice that refused to be used up and discarded. Today, she lives quietly but proudly, performing occasionally, reflecting often, and mentoring others whenever she can. She doesn't crave applause, she craves honesty. And now, after decades of being shaped by others, she finally owns her story in its full light, the pain, the glory, the losses, the triumphs. Nashville gave her a stage, but she built the soul of the show. And for all it tried to steal, it never took her essence, that still belongs to her. The industry may forget. Time may blur the details. But legends like Janie Fricke don't vanish, they become the roots, the foundation others grow from. And when the dust settles, when the names fade from marquees, and the charts reshuffle again and again, one truth will remain: Janie Fricke didn't just survive Nashville, she outlasted it, in silence, in song, in strength.